In this video, I'm going to talk about the 5 elements, how the 5 elements correspond to the human body, the world around us, and what that means to you. I'm Professor Chi. I help people raise their vibration. Welcome to yet another video. Now let's get started. The 5 elements is an ancient Chinese idea of a way to classify the functions of the human body, how those functions relate to the natural world around us, how they interact, how they work against each other, and how these 5 elements can be treated. It is an imaginary landscape in a way to understand what's being observed in the human body. Initially, and the very first thought is that there is one qi. There's one kind of qi. This yang qi, or the original qi, becomes 2, or yin and yang, or positive and negative. In everything on this planet, it's either positive and negative, and both at the same time. Positive and negative work together to create, through friction, through working together, through opposing each other somewhat, they create this world around us. Everything in Chinese medicine in particular, and I'm going to be talking about Chinese medicine and Chinese philosophy, but mainly Chinese medicine. And just to classify things as yin and yang wasn't quite enough. So they broke the 2 down into 5. The 5 elements. In actuality, there's 4 elements. And it corresponds to the 4 directions, north, south, east, and west. In the middle is the earth, which is the 5th element. But it's a little bit deceiving in the sense that it is an element, but it is all of the elements. All of the elements are the earth. All the fire, metal, water, and wood, they are of the earth. So there is only 4 directions, but the omnipotent direction and the direction of all directions is the earth itself. So we can say there are 4 directions, and then the 5th direction is the center. The center. So if we're going to have 4 directions, it makes sense that they're coming from somewhere. That somewhere is the earth. The 5 elements correspond to the 5 senses. I'm going to have 5 more films that are going to go into details of each of the elements. But right now we're just going to give an overview of what is going to be covered, or what is covered rather, in the 5 element theory. And the first idea and where it comes from is, like I just said, the 4 seasons, the 4 directions that are all from the earth, which makes 5. And that corresponds to the 5 senses. Each of the elements has a sense that it rules. Then that is broken down further, or corresponds rather, to the 5 organs, the 5 internal organs. Not to make it too complicated, but each of the elements has actually 2 organs within each element, and they're yin and yang. For instance, the lung, which is yin, and the large intestine, which is yang. The liver, which is yin, and the gallbladder, which is yang. The special element is fire, and the fire element has 4 internal organs. Now, that just proves just how important fire is, and fire represents metabolism. And now, just like all the 4 of the elements are rooted in the earth, all of these elements are also dependent upon metabolism, upon fire. So 4 internal organs are given to the fire element. Now, it's kind of interesting because 2 of the elements, the yin, which is the heart, and the yang, which is the small intestine, and then the other 2 are rather aphromous. You know, they don't actually have an internal organ attached to them, and that is the sanjiao, which is the triple burner. And well, we'll get into that in a coming film. So each of these internal organs that correspond to to each of the 5 elements has a certain process and function. And it's interesting because the way the theory is set out is that each of these processes and functions either help each other or work against each other. And there's a rather complex idea around how they work together or work against each other. These concepts of the internal organs either working together or working against each other are very useful concepts when it comes to treatment, when it comes to figuring out patterns of dysfunction and what to do about these patterns of dysfunction. Within each of the elements, there's also a season. Like for instance, the liver, which is wood. It's the springtime. Things are moving upward and things are very yang in the spring. And the liver is a very yang yin organ. It's about metabolism and it helps everything in the body move. And we know now that the liver is about protein synthesis and storing blood. And it definitely has a very dynamic relationship with all the other internal organs. Each of these elements has a season, and those seasons have a color. For instance, the wood is the springtime and the color is green. And you might think, well, yeah, that's interesting, but it's actually a dynamic concept that is used in treatment and in diagnosis, or not diagnosis so much as figuring out patterns of dysfunction. The green color, when you see the green color on somebody's face, you know right away there's something going on in the wood element. If there's the greenish yellow color in the sclera, you know something is going on with the liver. So these ideas have their roots in practicality, like so many things in Chinese ideas, Chinese culture. They may seem outlandish to us, and because most of them are pre-scientific. These ideas came about before the advent of modern science, so they may seem archaic and a bit like some sort of superstition, but they're not really superstitions at all. They're just based in the natural world, and many of these concepts have proven to be true through research, through modern research. Each of the internal organs obviously has some sort of secretion going on as well, and that secretion creates a certain kind of taste. For instance, the bitter flavor in the mouth is indicative that the liver in the wood element is working too hard and there's too much bile in the system. That over-biliousness is going to taste bitter in the mouth, particularly the first thing in the morning. Interestingly enough, there's a time of the day for each of these elements as well. So if you feel really good a certain time of the day, that's indicative that that element is in balance and is operating well. And if there's then chances are there'll be another time of the day when you don't feel so good, and that's indicative that that channel or that element is out of balance. Along with the taste and the hour of the day, there's a certain smell. And this smell is how the person smells. The kind of smells that you might pick up on and you smell a lot. And this is very interesting and it's rather esoteric, but it's again another little clue. All these are just clues to treatment. You can't say, oh my, I see a green look on their face, so I know there's something wrong in the wood element. All of these ideas are just little clues that when they're put together, they create a big pattern for the practitioner to be able to figure out what kind of treatment to use.
In Chinese medicine, it's more about treatment and less about diagnosis. The patterns or the things being out of sequence, the things being out of whack, show the kind of treatment that needs to be done. When we see a certain element out of phase with the other elements, then we know that we have to treat that channel, or the channel that opposes that channel, or the internal organ that's affecting that internal organ. The 5-element theory is relatively simple at first, until you start adding it all together. When you see all the patterns at once, it can be overwhelming. That's the reason why all the little details and clues that are picked up in Chinese medicine are taken with a grain of salt and put with the other patterns, and then a big pattern comes together. From there, we can figure out through pulse diagnosis and observing the tongue, and most importantly, what the patient is exhibiting, the symptoms they're having, what they wrote in their intake form, and what they tell us. All those put together creates a landscape of treatment, or what seems to need to be done. From there, a treatment plan is formulated, and you begin treatment with acupuncture and herbs and massage, and perhaps cupping and gua sha, all these different modalities in Chinese medicine. And if the patient gets better, you're on the right track. If the next time you see them, the signs and symptoms are better, and their pulse feels better, and their appetite's better, and whatever symptoms and pain they had seems to get better, then you know you're moving in the right direction. However, every time is a new time. Every time you see a patient, it's a new day, and you have to reassess them, or at least get an idea of what is better or what's worse, so you can know what to do is next. It's not enough to just say, this person has this. I say that, I've made a diagnosis and now they have it, and every time I see them, I'm going to treat them for that. That does not work in this kind of natural medicine, because it's like we're a gardener. We feed feed them with the right amount of nutrients. We prune away at that which is growing out of control. We perhaps help with this element and cut back this element, so that you get a nice growth towards optimal health. Not perfect health, because that doesn't exist, but optimal health, because all of us have a little bit of dysfunction going, and there'll be a predilection towards that dysfunction, and it's more about balance, creating a certain kind of balance. The channels that connect the internal organs are the final aspect of the 5-element theory, and each of the internal organs has 2 channels, and one's yin and one's yang. For instance, the lung is on this yin part of the arm, and the large intestine is exactly opposite of it on the yang part of the arm. How clever. And this is how Chinese medicine works. Everything is paired. The one original energy is paired into yin and yang. That yin and yang breaks down into 5 different elements, and then through that theory that the 1 becomes 2 and the 2 become 5, we can figure out a plan of how to balance all those opposing forces in such a way that the patient becomes better, that optimal health is achieved, that a plan for whatever element is the predominant element for you to have problems with, we address that and give you something to do, food-wise, exercise-wise, qigong-wise, and treatment-wise, to make that predilection towards imbalance come into balance. And for this reason, Chinese medicine is a wonderful way to get healthy and stay healthy. Now, I'm going to have more films to go into depth about each of these elements, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.